You've probably heard it 1,000 times already. XRP is the future of finance. For years, retail investors have been called dreamers, conspiracy theorists, or just plain lucky gamblers for believing that. But here's the thing. The very same institutions that once dismissed XRP and blockchain are now beginning to admit what we've been saying all along. The Federal Reserve, major Wall Street firms, some of the biggest asset managers in the world. They're no longer ignoring this technology. They're preparing for it quietly, strategically. And that's why this video matters, because what's happening right now isn't hype. It's the first real signs of a massive shift in the global financial systems. So, before we dive into all the latest XRP and Ripple news, and before we even touch on the banks now fighting back against stablecoins, let's zoom out for a second, because to understand where this market is heading, you need to see the bigger picture. And trust me, it's much bigger than most people realize. Imagine this: 5 years from now, every single financial instrument, every stock, every bond, every fund traded on chain. Not in some distant sci-fi future, but within this decade. That's not my prediction. That's coming straight from top-level executives inside the traditional finance world. They're saying it openly now. If there are $4.5 trillion sitting in digital wallets today, that number is going up, not down. And they're right, because this isn't just about Bitcoin anymore. This is about tokenization, the process of bringing real-world assets like real estate, treasuries, ETFs, and even debt markets onto blockchain rails. Just think about it. When you can buy, sell, and settle a stock instantly, when your investment portfolio rebalances automatically with a single on-chain transaction, when global markets run 247 with no middleman, that's not a new product, that's a new system. And this is exactly the system XRP and Ripple have been building toward from day one. Let's look at the numbers for a moment, because they tell a shocking story. Global real estate, $654 trillion. Global stocks, $145 trillion. Global bonds, $120 trillion. Treasuries, $28.6 trillion. Money market funds, $122.3 trillion. Sovereign wealth funds, $14 trillion. Global debt, $338 trillion. Global derivatives market, over $1 quadrillion. Now here's the question: how much of that has actually been tokenized? So far, practically nothing, maybe a few $billion total, not even a drop in the ocean. But over the next 5 to 10 years, we're talking about trillions, possibly quadrillions of dollars in tokenized value. And when that happens, when all this value gets put on chain, what network is it going to live and move on? That's where things get very interesting, because if you hold XRP or any crypto asset that powers real, a world settlement, you're not just holding a coin. You're holding a piece of the future financial network, the rails that money itself will move on. And that's why people are willing to take the risk, because they understand how monumental this transition really is. Of course, risk is part of the game. The crypto market isn't a fairy tale. People lose everything every day, especially when they chase hype or play with leverage. But the vision behind XRP isn't about hype. It's about infrastructure. It's about solving $1 trillion problem, how value moves across borders in real time. So before you let the fear, uncertainty, and noise cloud your view, take a second to realize this. What's coming isn't some far-fetched dream. It's a full-scale reinvention of money, how it's stored, moved, and exchanged. And as this new world is being built, those who understand it early yet will be the ones standing at the center of it. Last time, we set the stage. The world is moving on chain. Trillions of dollars in real-world value are preparing to be tokenized, and networks like XRP are positioned right in the middle of that transformation. But if you think the traditional banking system is just going to sit back and watch this new era unfold, think again. Because right now, a silent war is brewing, a war between decentralized innovation and traditional financial power. And the latest front in that war, stable coins. Let's break it down. Banks are finally starting to say the quiet part out loud. The same institutions that paid you next to nothing for keeping your money in a savings account. We're talking 0.5% interest if you're lucky, are now terrified that people are discovering they can earn 5, 6, even 8% yields through crypto stable coins and DeFi platforms. And honestly, who can blame them for being scared? Because when regular people realize they can move their money into a digital asset backed by dollars, earn 8% APY, and cash out instantly, the banks lose their monopoly. Depositors start withdrawing, traditional savings accounts dry up, and that's a death sentence for their business model. That's why this recent statement from the banking sector was so revealing. We're not relitigating something that's settled. One representative said this is about ensuring banks continue to support their communities and power the economy. Allowing exchanges like Coinbase or Kraken to pay interest on stable coins flies in the face of Congress's intentions. In plain English, they're panicking. Banks are saying, if you let crypto platforms pay interest, we can't compete. People will stop giving us deposits. And if deposits vanish, we can't lend money. They're framing it as protecting the community, but the truth is, they're protecting their profit engine. Because let's be honest, the banks have had decades to innovate. They've had endless opportunities to offer fair rates and better access to financial tools, but they didn't. Instead, they chose to reward only their high net worth clients while giving the average person crumbs. Now that DeFi and stablecoins are offering fair competition, they want to pull the plug. Think about the math for a second. If your bank gives you 0.5% interest, but a crypto platform offers 8%, that's a 7.5% difference. On $100,000, that's $7,500 more per year. On $1 million, that's $75,000 per year. That's not pocket change. That's a living wage for some families. And banks know it. So now we're seeing traditional institutions lobbying Congress, trying to reshape the laws around stablecoins, specifically to block these interest-bearing payment accounts. They claim it's about stability and risk management, but behind closed doors, it's about control. The old system doesn't want competition. Now here's the plot twist. Banks were actually involved when the Genius Act, the legislation governing stablecoin frameworks, was being written. They had their seat at the table, they could have shaped it. But now that the act gives room for crypto companies to thrive, they're backpedaling. The industry is split right down the middle. On one side, the banking lobby is armed with decades of influence. On the other, the DeFi innovators supported by millions of retail investors who've seen how much fairer blockchain finance can be. Who wins this battle will determine whether your money in the future lives inside a bank vault or on a blockchain ledger. And this is where XRP's role becomes even more fascinating. Because while stablecoins fight for recognition, XRP is quietly establishing itself as a bridge asset, not a replacement for fiat, but a tool that connects fiat, stablecoins, and digital markets together. It's not trying to destroy the system, it's building the new rails that both sides will eventually have to use. But as with every revolution, the old guard doesn't go down without a fight. And that brings us to what's happening next. Direct commentary from Federal Reserve officials themselves. They're finally addressing the question, should stablecoins even be allowed to pay yield? Their answer might surprise you. The Federal Reserve is finally acknowledging what crypto users have known for years. Digital money and blockchain-based finance are no longer fringe experiments. They're now serious competitors to the traditional system. But what's fascinating is how defensive the Fed sounds when it comes to one particular topic, yield on stable coins. In a recent discussion, Federal Reserve officials openly debated whether crypto platforms should be allowed to pay interest on stablecoin holdings. One senior member said, "You should be able to pay some kind of reward or yield on the actual T-bills and money market funds that you're holding. You should be able to pass some of that on to customers, but it's not supposed to be an investment vehicle." That single sentence reveals everything. They know stablecoins are backed by yield-bearing instruments like treasury bills. They know the value exists, but they don't want the average person to directly benefit from it. The fear isn't technical, it's structural. If everyone could earn yield directly through blockchain, the entire model of deposit-based banking would collapse. For decades, banks have taken deposits from customers, lent them out for higher returns, and pocketed the spread. That's how the system works. But when crypto allows people to cut out the middleman and earn yield directly from the source, the traditional model starts crumbling. The Fed's hesitation is really about preserving that hierarchy of control. Another Fed member said something even more telling. If Congress wanted to let you pay interest, they should just let you pay interest. Trying to backdo it is a little funny. It's not supposed to bear interest. That's not up to me, that's up to Congress. In simpler terms, the Fed doesn't want innovation to decide the rules. They want to remain the gatekeepers of who can and cannot earn interest. That stance completely misses the point of blockchain. Decentralization removes the need for permission in the first place. This argument shows how deeply the legacy system depends on the concept of control. Stablecoins by design challenge that control. They enable transparent, programmable finance. They let users move money globally and earn fair returns without needing a brick-and-mortar bank or a banker's approval. That's what scares policymakers. If stable coins become mainstream yield vehicles, the traditional banking structure would lose its monopoly over deposit creation. And if that happens, control over money itself begins to shift away from central authorities and toward the open networks that actually run the value exchange. Eleanor Tarrant, one of the few journalists tracking this shift closely, recently interviewed a Federal Reserve Board member. He admitted, "You can disintermediate a bank, but you can't disintermediate the banking system." That line exposes the core belief of the establishment. They still think they can contain this evolution, that no matter how digital or decentralized finance becomes, the system will stay intact. But blockchain doesn't just move money faster. It rewrites how money works. It doesn't ask permission. It replaces the infrastructure itself. When regulators insist that stablecoins can't bear yield, they're not protecting consumers. They're protecting the machinery of traditional finance. Because if stablecoins and decentralized platforms start offering transparent, risk-managed returns, millions of people would no longer rely on banks for basic savings and income. And the truth is that shift is already happening. Billions of dollars have flowed into digital assets, decentralized protocols, and blockchain-based funds. The more the traditional system resists, the faster innovation adapts around it. At the heart of this entire debate is one fundamental question. Should financial opportunity be limited by permission or powered by technology? The answer will determine who controls money in the next decade. Centralized authorities or decentralized networks that anyone can access. Few people outside high finance understand just how massive the US repo market really is. It's a quiet giant, a short-term lending network that moves trillions of dollars every single day, keeping the entire global financial system liquid. Recent data from the Federal Reserve shows the repo market's gross value reaching around 12 trillion. That's more than the GDP of China, Japan, and Germany combined. Now imagine for a second what happens if even a fraction of that market begins to settle on blockchain infrastructure and specifically using XRP as a bridge asset. The potential shockwave across liquidity, settlement speed, and asset pricing would be unlike anything the financial system has seen in a century. The repo market operates like the heart of banking liquidity. It allows institutions to borrow and lend cash and securities overnight using treasuries and bonds as collateral. The process is critical but outdated. Manual confirmations, delays, counterparty risk, and heavy reliance on intermediaries. Settlement takes hours, sometimes days. Ripple's technology built around instant settlement and tokenized value transfer targets exactly this bottleneck. With XRP's ability to move large sums globally in seconds, the idea of settling repo transactions instantly and transparently isn't theoretical anymore. It's technologically possible. Financial analyst Brad Kimmis recently highlighted how Ripple's quiet acquisitions are signaling deeper involvement. Ripple reportedly bought into Hidden Road and G Treasury, two entities that interface directly with institutional liquidity and U.S. Treasury operations. The speculation is that Ripple could help settle not just standard payments, but repo transactions and DTCC settlements, systems that handle quadrillions in global value. That possibility raises an important question. What would the XRP price look like if it were used in this market? The math is staggering. Even conservative models suggest that using XRP to facilitate a portion of the 12 trillion repo market could dramatically increase demand for liquidity. When financial institutions need XRP to move trillions in value efficiently, the buying pressure skyrockets. One simulation model shows that 10 billion net inflow into XRP, representing institutional accumulation for settlement purposes, could theoretically push its price from under $3 to as high as $90 due to limited supply and rapid velocity of use. The reason lies in what analysts call the liquidity multiplier effect. Under thin liquidity conditions, large capital inflows don't just increase price linearly, they explode exponentially as available supply shrinks faster than new XRP enters circulation. Of course, these projections are theoretical, but they demonstrate the scale of what's at stake. The repo market isn't a speculative playground like meme coins or NFTs. It's the very core of global finance. If blockchain becomes the trusted settlement layer for that system, XRP could evolve from an altcoin into an infrastructure asset. Critics often argue that XRP can be reused thousands of times per day, implying limited need for large supply accumulation. That's true to an extent, but it ignores real-world constraints. XRP used in separate institutional corridors or reserve pools can't always be instantly reallocated. When global institutions each require their own XRP reserves for localized liquidity, the total locked supply grows, and the scarcer it becomes, the more valuable each token is. Blockchain integration into the repo market would also provide transparency. Currently, even the size of the US repo system is hard to track because of opaque reporting. Tokenized settlements on a distributed ledger would make every transaction visible in real time, drastically reducing systemic risk and improving monetary oversight. In this context, Ripple's focus on compliance partnerships with regulators and enterprise-grade infrastructure begins to make sense. They're not building for traders, they're building for institutions, for markets that move in trillions, not billions. When global liquidity finally shifts onto blockchain rails, the networks capable of handling that volume will define the next era of finance. XRP is positioned precisely for that role, a neutral bridge asset designed to carry value wherever it needs to go. The repo market may be invisible to most people, but it could be the single largest catalyst for XRP's true utility-driven growth. The technology exists, the partnerships are forming, and the institutions are quietly preparing. The only thing left is adoption, and when it happens, it won't be gradual. It will be instant. The financial world is undergoing one of the most important structural changes in modern history. Central banks, regulators, and private institutions are finally acknowledging what blockchain innovators have been building for over a decade. A new financial infrastructure capable of operating faster, cheaper, and more transparently than anything that came before. The US Federal Reserve has already taken a major step by launching FedNow, a real-time payment system designed to settle transactions between banks instantly. On paper, it sounds revolutionary. Instant payments available 247. But behind the sleek branding lies an important truth. FedNow isn't blockchain, it's still a centralized network controlled by the Federal Reserve using legacy infrastructure upgraded for speed, not decentralization. FedNow represents the traditional system's attempt to mimic what blockchain has already achieved. The difference is that blockchain doesn't require intermediaries. It doesn't charge the same settlement fees or rely on banking hours. It's always open, always verifiable, and global by design. The US government understands this gap. That's why the Federal Reserve has begun conducting hands-on research into tokenization, smart contracts, and artificial intelligence for use in payment systems. Officials have admitted they are studying how these technologies could upgrade existing infrastructure and support deeper collaboration with the private sector. The implication is clear. If the Fed ever integrates blockchain directly into the US financial network, it won't build everything from scratch. It will partner with existing companies that already understand the technology. Companies like Ripple, Circle, and Coinbase which have been actively involved in government and central bank discussions around digital payments. Ripple, in particular, has maintained consistent dialogue with regulators and policymakers around the world. Its focus has never been to replace banks, but to help them operate on a modern financial rail, one that can settle cross-border value instantly using XRP as a bridge currency. That strategy has positioned Ripple as one of the few crypto companies directly aligned with institutional needs. The vision emerging is a hybrid world where traditional finance merges with blockchain efficiency. Imagine a system where the Federal Reserve runs its settlement layer through FedNow, but tokenized assets from treasuries to bonds are traded and settled on interoperable blockchain networks. XRP could serve as the neutral bridge between these layers, converting and transferring value seamlessly across systems. Global discussions around this integration are already happening. Ripple executives and policymakers have participated in think tanks and international panels addressing the future of cross-border settlements, liquidity management, and tokenized value exchange. The outcome of these conversations points toward a unified digital-first financial system where public and private sectors collaborate through blockchain interoperability. What makes XRP unique in this equation is its design purpose. It was never created to be a speculative token. Its core function is instant settlement, moving value between parties without friction. As more assets become tokenized, XRP can provide the liquidity necessary for these new digital instruments to flow between institutions and markets. This transformation isn't hypothetical, it's happening in real time. The Federal Reserve's open acknowledgement of tokenization research marks a shift in tone from skepticism to exploration. They are no longer asking if blockchain will matter. They're asking how it will fit into the existing system. Every major financial revolution begins quietly, in meetings and memos most people never see. Today, those meetings involve names like Ripple and concepts like distributed ledger settlement. Tomorrow, they'll shape how every dollar, bond, and share moves across the global economy. The world's financial infrastructure is being rewritten, and when the transition completes, money won't just move faster, it will move differently. The systems of control will shift, and value will flow through the networks that can handle both speed and trust. Ripple's early bet on compliance, institutional partnerships, and cross-border settlement may prove to be one of the most strategic moves in the history of digital finance. The question is no longer whether blockchain will power the next generation of money. It's which networks will carry the weight of that responsibility. The transformation of global finance is no longer theoretical. It's unfolding right before our eyes. Distributed ledger technology and digital assets are stepping out of the shadows and into the foundation of the financial system itself. What was once dismissed as experimental is now being recognized by central banks, regulators, and market leaders as the next evolution of money. The Federal Reserve recently acknowledged that distributed ledgers and crypto assets are no longer on the fringes. They are now being woven into the fabric of the payment and financial system. This statement alone signals a new reality. Digital assets are no longer the outsider. They're becoming the infrastructure. For years, the Federal Reserve acted as a convener and operator of payment systems, managing settlement rails between financial institutions. Now it's exploring tokenization, smart contracts, and even the intersection of AI and payments. The same technologies that blockchain networks like Ripple have spent years refining. This research isn't academic curiosity, it's preparation for integration. Ripple's design philosophy fits directly into this evolution. Instead of creating an alternative economy, Ripple built tools that connect existing institutions to blockchain rails. XRP's function as a bridge asset allows different currencies and tokenized assets to move between networks with minimal friction. Whether it's fiat, stablecoins, or central bank digital currencies, XRP provides the instant liquidity and conversion mechanism required for smooth cross-border value transfer. This approach gives Ripple a powerful advantage. While many crypto projects chase speculative hype, Ripple focuses on solving the real-world problem of settlement inefficiency, the time and cost it takes to move value globally. Every major financial entity wants faster, cheaper, and more transparent transactions, and XRP is purpose built for that mission. The US and its allies have already begun modernizing payment systems through projects like FedNow and international digital currency pilots. But even these systems are just stepping stones toward full blockchain integration. FedNow operates within a closed centralized network, but true tokenization requires open, interoperable infrastructure, the kind of environment XRP can thrive in. Across the Atlantic, similar developments are happening in Europe and Asia. The United Kingdom's Treasury, Singapore's Monetary Authority, and the UAE's central bank are all working on frameworks for digital asset settlements. Ripple frequently appears at the table during these discussions, often alongside firms like Circle and established financial institutions. It's becoming increasingly difficult to imagine a future financial system that doesn't include Ripple's technology somewhere within its framework. This is more than an upgrade, it's a global reset of how value is managed and exchanged. The same way the internet transformed communication, blockchain is transforming money. The power is shifting from intermediaries to infrastructure, and the assets that represent this infrastructure, like XRP, stand to benefit the most. The potential scale is beyond comprehension. Real estate, stocks, bonds, treasuries, and even derivative markets worth hundreds of trillions of dollars are preparing to move onto digital rails. Every single one of those transactions will require liquidity. XRP's role as a neutral bridge asset places it directly in that flow of capital. Skeptics will say it's unrealistic, but history shows that technological revolutions always start this way, quietly, then suddenly. The transition to blockchain-based finance won't happen overnight, but when it does reach critical mass, it will seem instantaneous. For individuals, the takeaway is simple. Education is opportunity. Understanding how blockchain reshapes money could mean the difference between being part of the future or being left behind by it. Those who recognize this shift early and position themselves accordingly will be standing at the center of a brand new economic landscape. The next financial era won't be defined by borders or banking hours. It will be defined by networks, instant, borderless, transparent networks where value moves as freely as information does today. That is the digital revolution. That is the new financial order. And at the heart of it all lies one question. When the world's value moves on chain, which asset will it move through?